The city has no name yet, and the first blood has already been spilled. Imagine it, 2 infants in the reeds on the bank of the Tiber, left where death was meant to find them. A she-wolf, milk. Survival against all logic. And then, years later, through the words of gods and quarrels over hills, one brother kills the other over a city's name, over a boundary line. The victor gives the city his name, Romulus. And so, not from armies, not from treaties, not from calm intention, is born what will one day swallow the entire known world. From fratricide, from blood on stone. If you want to understand why Rome was built the way it was built, why it conquers to the last, fights to the last, lives and falls the way it lives and falls, you don't need to read a single book. Just remember the first day. It already tells the whole story. 753 BC, a city on 7 hills, a few thousand people, a river and ambition. And somehow, in some absolutely impossible way, across 12 centuries, this same small patch of earth will become the center of a civilization governing 1 in every 5 people on earth. 50 million people, all of them technically Romans. But first, kings. Rome begins as a monarchy, and this is perhaps the only moment in its history when it behaves like an ordinary ancient city. 7 kings, nearly 2.5 centuries. And then, in 509 BC, the Romans do what will become their defining act. They expel a tyrant, Tarquinius Superbus, and decide never to have a king again. Never. That word will become almost sacred. Instead, 2 consuls, elected annually with equal powers and the right to veto each other. The Senate, laws, the Republic. And immediately, war. Because here is the thing about Rome. It never knew peace as a state of silence. It warred with the Etruscans, warred with the Latins, warred with the Sabines, the Samnites, the Umbrians, with everyone who had the misfortune of living nearby. But each of these wars made Rome stronger, not weaker. It lost battles, lost them terribly, notably when the Gauls burned the city in 390 BC and marched straight through the Forum, and still did not surrender. This is not stubbornness, it is something deeper. Rome converted defeat into instruction and enemies into lessons. Conquered peoples became allies, allies became legionaries, legionaries became Rome. It was the most successful absorption machine in the ancient world. And then, Carthage. The First Punic War begins in 264 BC, and Rome has never fought at sea. Carthage is a maritime power with 1,000 years of experience. Rome looks at an enemy ship, builds one just like it, according to legend, copied from a single captured Carthaginian vessel, and puts out to sea. Against all logic, it wins the first great naval battle at Mylae in 260 BC. But that is not the war that nearly destroyed Rome. That is Hannibal, 218 BC. Hannibal Barca, perhaps the most brilliant military commander of the ancient world, leads an army from Spain through southern Gaul and crosses the Alps in winter. With war elephants. This is the equivalent of an invasion through a door that should not have existed in the ancient world. He loses thousands of men and animals in the mountains, but reaches Italy and simply does not stop. At the Trebia, at Lake Trasimene, and then Cannae, 216 BC, one of the greatest military catastrophes in Roman history. 70,000 Roman soldiers killed in a single day. A consul dead on the battlefield. Allies begin defecting to Carthage. Rome stands a few decisions away from annihilation. And here, Rome does something Hannibal had not anticipated. It refuses to make peace. The Senate, that same Senate that had lost more men than some city-states ever possessed, voted against any negotiations. No surrender, no embassies. Rome begins to fight differently. It avoids Hannibal in Italy and strikes his allies in Spain and Africa. Publius Cornelius Scipio, not yet 30, crosses the sea and attacks Carthage directly. Hannibal is forced to return home. At Zama, 202 BC, Carthage is crushed. And this stubbornness, this inability to accept defeat as final, this is the true character of Rome. It wins. It always finds a way to win. And then, the entire Mediterranean world, Greece, Macedonia, Syria, Spain, North Africa, each new conquest opens new markets, new resources, new gold. And here something interesting and terrible begins simultaneously. The Republic becomes too large for its own laws. Roman law was written for a city-state. It cannot manage an empire. The wealth from conquest is not distributed evenly. It concentrates in the hands of a few senatorial families who buy up land, ruining small farmers. Those same small farmers who are the backbone of the legions. The Gracchi brothers attempt land reform in the 130s and 120s BC. Both are killed. This is the moment when the Republic begins to devour itself. Marius, Sulla, the first civil conflict in which Roman legions march on Rome itself. Sulla in 88 BC. Spartacus raises a slave rebellion in 73 BC, holding all of southern Italy in terror for 3 years. 6,000 crucified slaves along the Appian Way after its suppression. If you think this is just a chapter from a textbook, imagine a road 200 kilometers long, lined on both sides with crosses. But then something larger comes. The triumvirate, Caesar, Crassus, Pompey, 3 men who informally divide the Republic among themselves. The beauty and horror of this moment is that outwardly everything looks as though the Republic continues to exist. Caesar crosses the Rubicon on January 10th, 49th BC. One sentence, one river, the complete end of everything Rome thought about itself. The Rubicon was a boundary no general was permitted to cross with an army. It was law. To cross meant to start a civil war, and Caesar crosses it as though going for a stroll. And according to Suetonius, utters, "The die is cast, Pompey flees, Rome falls, Caesar becomes dictator." Then, dictator in perpetuity. The Senate declares him a god during his own lifetime, which is perhaps the most vivid act of collective self-deception in ancient politics. And then, the Ides of March, 44 BC, 23 stab wounds, Caesar dead on the floor of the Senate, and the killers, Brutus, Cassius, and the others, sincerely believe they have saved the Republic. They thought that killing one man would restore 500 years of institutions. But the Republic cannot be resurrected by assassination, especially when everyone who might have defended it had long since accepted the rules of the new game. Octavian, Caesar's nephew and heir, understands this better than anyone. He does not call himself dictator. He calls himself simply first among equals, princeps, and preserves all the Republican offices, all the theater of the Senate, all the old words. But the power is his. After his victory over Antony and Cleopatra at Actium in 31 BC, he stands alone. The Senate grants him the title Augustus in 27 BC. He is the first emperor. The Republic is officially dead, but no one announces its death. Everyone pretends nothing has changed. This is the Roman way of saying goodbye to what you loved. Keep the words and release the substance, and somehow it works. Better than anyone could have expected. Augustus rules for 40 years and transforms Rome into a marble city. By his own account, he found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. Peace, trade, law, roads, 25,000 miles of solid highways connecting Britain to Mesopotamia. Aqueducts carrying water to places that never had it. The Pax Romana, the Roman peace, 2.5 centuries of relative calm within the empire. The longest peaceful period in Mediterranean history. Astonishing, impossible, real, but then Caligula, Nero, Domitian. Here is the problem with passing absolute power through hereditary succession. It does not filter for competence. Nero kills his own mother. Caligula, according to ancient sources, though some scholars believe these accounts are exaggerated, descends to such levels of cruelty and madness that even senators who had tolerated everything can no longer bear it. But then the central truth becomes clear. The system survives even the worst emperors, because it is already too large for one person to destroy quickly. Rome survived Nero, survived the civil war of 69 AD, the year of the 4 emperors, emerged under Vespasian, under Titus, under Trajan. Trajan, 117 AD, the greatest territorial extent of the Roman state in all its history, from the Atlantic coast of Portugal to Mesopotamia, from the borders of Scotland to the Sahara. This is the peak. That moment when looking at a map, you would ask, how? How can one state stretch this far? Hadrian, Trajan's successor, wisely chooses to consolidate borders rather than seek new conquests. Hadrian's Wall in Britain, 122 AD. For the first time, Rome says, "This is where we stop." And this, if you think about it, is the first clear sign that the turn has already come. Because after the peak comes not collapse, but fatigue. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher on the throne, last of the 5 good emperors, rules through plague, through Germanic raids, through endless border wars, and writes himself a journal, the Meditations, where he tries to remind himself how to remain human under the weight of power. This is one of the most moving documents of the ancient world. The most powerful man on earth writing notes to himself at night so as not to forget humility. He dies on the frontier in 180 AD and leaves the throne to his son, Commodus, who proves to be a catastrophe. Because this is how systems fall, not from one great blow, but through a series of decisions, each of which seems justified in the moment of its making. The 3rd century, 235–284 AD, 50 years, 26 officially recognized emperors, most of them killed by their own soldiers. Plague had already ravaged the empire under Marcus Aurelius. Now, new waves of disease, currency debasement, inflation, barbarian invasions on multiple frontiers simultaneously. Rome does not collapse, it stretches. A little more, a little more. A crack here, a crack there. Diocletian in 284 barely stabilizes the situation by dividing governance among 4 rulers, the Tetrarchy. But even this is only a postponement, because then Constantine arrives. 306 AD, another civil war, another victor. But Constantine does something no Roman ruler before him had done. In 313, he legalizes Christianity through the Edict of Milan and moves the capital east to Constantinople, the new Rome on the Bosphorus, consecrated in 330. The old capital is no longer the center. The west begins to drift. Theodosius Thumb in 395 divides the empire between 2 sons, west and east, officially, permanently. And the west, with its vast borders, its impoverished population, its inability to pay the legionaries enough to keep them loyal, undergoes the slow process that will later be called the Fall, though the people living through it simply thought they were living through hard times. 410 AD, Alaric and the Visigoths enter Rome. For the first time in 800 years, an enemy army stands in the city itself. St. Augustine, hearing of this in Africa, writes the City of God, trying to explain how an unconquerable city could fall. The shock reverberates across the entire civilized world. Not an ending, but something had broken in how people thought about Rome. If even Rome can fall, and then, slowly, ambiguously, without any single dramatic moment, the West comes apart. Attila's Huns press barbarian peoples deep into Roman territory. The Vandals take Carthage in 439, Rome again 455. The Vandals sack the city for 14 days. The final decades of the Western Roman Empire are a procession of puppet emperors behind whom stand barbarian warlord protectors. 476 AD. Odoacer, leader of a Germanic tribe, deposes the last Western emperor and sends him into exile. Without a battle, without a tragic final stand. He simply removes the purple cloak and says, "It's over, and here is what will not let me rest," as it has not let thousands of people rest since. The name of this last emperor, Romulus Augustulus. Romulus. The same name as the first king, the same name as the fratricide who gave the city his name more than 1200 years ago. The city was born from fratricide and bore the killer's name. It fell with the killer's name on its lips. This is not symbolism for symbolism's sake. It is what happens when a civilization builds its first and greatest legend on violence and never truly answers the question that violence poses. What is the foundation of what we are building? But here is what truly matters, and this is something I cannot make peace with, no matter how many times I think about it. The fall of Rome was not inevitable. Not one step between Augustus and Odoacer was predetermined. Every crack appeared from a specific decision, failing to reform land distribution in time, appointing an incompetent heir, cutting legions on borders where they were needed, trusting a protector for whom your weakness was an advantage. Civilizations do not fall from natural disasters. They gradually cease to believe in themselves, in their institutions, in their laws, in the reason they gathered together in the first place. Rome built roads that outlasted it by millennia, a legal system that lives in every modern Western legal tradition. Architecture, language, the concept of the republic, the concept of citizenship, the idea that belonging to a community can be a legal rather than merely a blood tie. It accomplished all of this, starting from 2 infants in the reeds and 1 killing on a hill, and it lost it, not at once, not catastrophically, but drop by drop, decision by decision, so imperceptibly that the people living through it thought it was simply the ordinary passage of time. Before we leave 476 behind, what surprised you most about Rome's fall? The slowness of it, or how familiar the causes seem?